Welcome to the Ketodontist podcast with your host, Dr. Matt. We're here to explore the worlds of low-carb and ketogenic diets, primal and paleo lifestyles, and oral and whole-body health. We're taking the best information from the leading minds in health and wellness and making those worlds collide. This is the Ketodontist podcast.
Hey gang, welcome back to the Ketodontist podcast. This is your host, Dr. Matthew Standridge. I am a practicing dentist here in Yates Center, Kansas, and I'm also a certified health coach, personal trainer, sports nutritionist, all that good stuff. And for those of you who are new to the show, I welcome you. I hope you get a lot out of this. I've had some spectacular guests in the past that I would really recommend you go back into the backlog and check those out. And then for those of you who are regular listeners, welcome back. I'm really honored that you're here. There's so much information. There's so many podcasts out there. There's all that stuff. The market's pretty saturated. And the fact that you take time to out of your busy schedule to listen to what I have to say, I don't take that lightly. So thank you for that. So today's episode is a two-parter about giving some updates about what's going on in my life, because part of this podcast is to share my personal journey. And then the other one actually was I scrapped what I was originally going to talk about because I found a video posted on CBS News talking crap about the keto diets and all that stuff, and it's just, of course, spread tons of misinformation in there. So I want to unpack that a little bit. First off, starting about 2020. So my first update is that I've decided that alcohol just really has no place in my life anymore. You can argue that it doesn't have a place in anybody's life, but because there's no nutritional value or benefit from it. It's just, it's a vice, pure and simple. And so I have decided to completely cut out alcohol out of my life. Where I want to go with me as a person, growing as a person, with my health, with my being present with my family, how I want to present as a doctor, as a business owner, all of that stuff. I've just decided that it's not for me anymore. And so I've completely cut out alcohol, and I'm actually about 34 days into that. And I gotta say, I'm feeling good. A sense of clarity, I would say. And so, every day it just gets easier and easier. So I didn't really see that happening. It wasn't like a New Year's resolution. It's just something that I came to realize and came to terms with, and just pulled the trigger on that. So if you see me posting about different mineral waters, now I'm a carbonated mineral water snob. That's what I've chosen to replace my periodic drinking with. So anyway, so that's a little update there. And then the big exciting news is that a lot of you who followed our journey, and especially the podcast I did with my wife at the beginning of 2019, I think we recorded it on New Year's Eve 2018, bringing in 2019, was that we have had issues with her getting pregnant. And we've actually been trying to get pregnant. I mean, I say I'm making deposits. It's up, but we've been trying to get pregnant, and for 3 years it just hasn't been happening. And that has put a big stress on our family, on our mental and emotional well-being. And I think a big part of that was because when we started trying to have Hazel, I was at the unhealthiest point in my life. I was at the heaviest, most toxic point in my life, and yet we got pregnant like that. Boom, one try, and hey, you're pregnant. And here I am. I've lost 100 pounds. She's lost weight. We're eating healthily and all that stuff, and yet it's just not happening. Well, it turns out 2.5 out of those 3 years, it just turns out we weren't going to be getting pregnant because she had an internal abnormality, derangement on the internal wall of her uterus where her C-section scar was. It had basically created tube that a fluid filled sac that was just getting not letting stuff clean out. It was an irregular surface, not allowing implantation. It was creating an inflammatory environment and all that stuff. So we didn't even find that out till this last summer, and then in September she underwent surgery to have it repaired, and then we had to wait 3 months. And so here in the second month of trying, I am proud to announce that she is expecting again. We just found that out less than a week ago, 6 days ago, actually. And so we are elated, and things are going to be changing around here. So I'm in preparation mode because it's funny. She just came back to start working with me at the office again. Just started back. She was there like a week, maybe 2, I don't know. And she was working at my office again, and that's how it was going to be, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, she's pregnant again. Now I have to find another front desk coordinator. Ah, she's awesome at it. Oh man, but it's for the best of reasons. I cannot properly state how excited we are. But that also means things have to change because I'm actually also looking at relocating my office just a door down, but to a bigger building because we're kind of starting to hit capacity issues with my dental practice, and I need to add more treatment operatories. And so we're actually looking at relocation, expansion, all this stuff. And that was going to keep me busy enough already. And now we found out she's expecting, so it's just doubly like, holy moly, 2020 is going to be a whirlwind year. And then also for me, that means like one of the reasons, and this is a justification in my head, not completely unfounded, but it is a little bit of a justification in the fact that I haven't really lost much weight over the last couple years. And a big part of that is just because I've been really busy with the office, and then also I was scared of reducing calories too much because that can affect fertility on the guy side. Going too low of calories, too low of fat, it can affect your swimmers, and it can affect your testosterone. And so that to me was kind of justification to not really focus on losing weight. Now I've been training, I'm stronger than I've ever been, I'm more athletic than I've ever been, but I mean, from a health standpoint, I still have a good, even though I've lost 100 or so pounds, I still have another 60 to 80 pounds to lose. Well, now that my job is done, it's a god-awful way to say it. Now that my job is done, I have eight or a half months to really get back on the ball before we have a newborn in the house again. So I am going to be going back into a fairly steep caloric deficit, and I can do so because I have a higher body fat. You know, for guys, if you're over 30% body fat, you can afford to be in a steeper caloric deficit. And so, and ladies too, if you're over 35-40% body fat as a woman, you can go into a fairly steep caloric deficit. You just have to be smart about it. You make sure you're getting adequate nutrition. Adequate protein is a must. I would, in keto gains in the coaching tribe, we call these poverty macros because it's they're lower calories. I won't give away exactly what my calories and my macros are set up because that's unique to me, and you don't need to be trying to do what I'm doing. But I will say total calories is between 13 to 1500. I'm on day 6 of this, by the way. I started like right after we found out she was pregnant. I'm like, okay, well, time to get back to cutting. but always prioritizing protein. So if I had to sum it up, it's like a mixture of PSMF and carnivore. Not full blown carnivore because I do have veggies here and there, but I'm prioritizing protein and keeping calories low, and so the most of my meals are basically just protein, and so but day 6, the first couple of days were tough, and I will say I started off at 280.8, and this is day 6. I started on a Sunday because we found out Saturday. I started on a Sunday, and I'm recording this on a Friday, so it's day 6 for me, and I am down to 274.2 as of this morning. So I want to, as far as a way of accountability, I'm going to be putting my scale weight on the podcast when I have time to record to give people updates. So, already down about 6-7 pounds, and a lot of that's going to be water weight and reduction in inflammation. So I know that. But yeah, so that's where we're at. Super, super excited. I'm just making sure I get adequate protein and electrolytes. I find when you're in an even steeper caloric deficit, electrolyte supplementation, it has to be even more on point. And so, salting the bejesus out of my foods, do elements. Speaking of element, I don't really think I know we talked about it back when Tyler and Luis were on the show, but if you're having issues with getting enough electrolytes in, really check out that element. Drink lmnt.com, and I'm right now in this thing, I'm doing basically 2 packs a day. I'm doing one as part of my pre-workout, and I have like half of it in my pre-workout, and the other half I do it during my workout. And then I have one in the afternoon because I usually train in the morning. So I have the other pack in a large bottle of water that I sip through the day in the afternoon. And then sometimes I may even still do a cup of bouillon after dinner. And I actually kind of find that warm, kind of brothy type food after dinner can help further sustain me, increased feelings of fullness after dinner, so that way I'm not going to bed hungry and stuff. So, but yeah, I've found that when going even lower calorie, electrolytes got to be dialed in. And that's, I think I was missing that for the first couple of days, even though I've always kept electrolytes good. I found I needed to up them even more. And once I got those dialed in starting day 3, I've been feeling pretty good. I haven't had any trouble sleeping. I haven't had any energy issues, any mood swings. Things have been going really well. So and I'm not hungry. And so I gotta say this has been pretty awesome so far. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. Basically, I'm going to be doing an aggressive cut until about the baby's born, which he or she is due in October. So I'm just really utilizing this time to make as much progress as I can, because I know once the baby comes along, progress is going to slow. I'm not going to be getting as good as sleep, all that stuff. So I'm kind of like trying to put up as much in reserves as possible until the baby comes, and then understand that the best I may be able to do at that point is just maintain, and that's okay. So I'm on a sprint for a little bit in preparation for the baby. So that's the big exciting news. And then for the rest of the show, I want to unpack a news article, quote unquote news article, that somebody forwarded me this morning, and it's bit on CBS News, and this cardiologist is talking about keto diets and basically spreading misinformation, spreading lies, and we'll go over that here in just a sec. Now, my computer, for some reason, is not wanting to record system audio, so I have my Zoom recorder out, and I'm going to be recording it, what plays through the speaker. I apologize if the sound quality on the video isn't that great. I don't know what's up with my computer. It's a couple years old, and I think it might be time for a new one. But anyways, let's go ahead, and I'm just going to play the video so you guys can hear it. And then, and I'm going to be kind of stopping in the after certain segments and kind of unpacking it. So here we go.
What does that affect potentially? How does that affect your heart potentially?
So a lot of patients of mine ask about the keto diet, and it's very popular. It's popular primarily for weight loss, and it can induce a pretty rapid weight loss over 2 to 6 months. The issue is it's sustainable.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it right there. So, we're branding ketogenic diets as high fat. And this is where keto has given itself an image problem and a branding and marketing problem, because we've wrapped keto in the lens of consuming uber high fat. And I bought into that early on, but that was years ago, and I found out really quickly that that's not the way the vast majority of people should be doing it. So to recap, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I'm going to keep going after it again, you do not need to consume high fat on a ketogenic diet. You do not. There's a difference between a therapeutic ketogenic diet, something that people are using for medicinal purposes, mainly epilepsy, maybe a certain adjunct of certain types of cancers, but that's a very nuanced discussion, and I'm not going into that. The vast majority of people, like she even said, are using it for weight loss purposes, and if that is the case, you do not need to be consuming tons of fat. So for the folks not on the video, just listening, they have this slide up breaking down the ketogenic diet, saying that 70 to 80% of the intake comes from fat, 10 to 20% protein, 5 to 10% of food from carbohydrates. And their source is Harvard Public Health. This is where keto has a real problem, is because we have focused on high fat and butter chugging and all that stuff, and that's now how the public sees it. And that is a real issue, because people really can get stalled out on that way of eating. And we need to refocus the message on keto from going, instead of consuming tons of fat, it's by eliminating the carbohydrates. That is where ketosis comes from. I haven't eaten anything but protein today. So far today, I have consumed about 70 grams of protein and only about 10 grams of fat. And I've consumed 0 carbohydrates. I've consumed like 2 net carbohydrates from my element packet, and that is about it. And yet, and I just tested before we started recording here, and yet my ketone levels, let's see if I can show this on the video, yet my ketone levels are 0.5. Now, 0.5 millimolar. I've always run low. That is better than I ever did fasting, drinking ketones, and butter chugging, bulletproof coffee. I am routinely 0.5 to 1, which is higher than I ever was on high-fat keto. And yet I'm prioritizing protein. Of the calories consumed, I would say 60% of them, of the calories consumed, come from protein. Now, here's the difference. The ketogenic diet, and in the way that I'm doing it, the ketogenic diet is indeed high fat from a fuel source, but that's not coming from the plate. If you have body fat to burn, you don't need to be consuming extra body fat. So if they were saying in this slide that the 70 to 80% of fat comes from calories burned as a fuel source for calories burned, I would absolutely be okay with that, because that is true. The vast majority of my calories being used for fuel right now is coming from fat, but I am in no way consuming 70 to 80% of my consumed calories from fat. So yes, fat as a fuel source, but if you have excess body fat to use, you don't need to be consuming it. Lower your carbohydrates so you can kick on fat oxidation and letting your body utilize more efficiently fat for fuel, and make sure you're getting enough protein to spare or even gain lean body mass, spare muscle. So here we go.
And the problem is when you're really limiting yourself to less than 50 grams of carbs, which is like one slice of bread or one apple, we find that over time, it's really not for a lot of people. And when you look out one...
Okay, so now she's talking about the sustainability of that. And there is a point to that. There is some validity to that, because the best diet in a way is the one that you can stick to. The problem is this argument that she's telling us can be applied to any diet. And you know why that is? Because all diets have abysmal compliance, and that's because change is hard. Long-term change, true lifestyle and behavioral change is hard. It's tough stuff. And so any diet has abysmal diet compliance, because the vast majority of people are not willing to go through the inside work to change their true behaviors. So that argument that she talks about sustainability, that can be applied to carnivore, paleo, keto, if it fits your macros, if veganism, lacto-ovo-vegetarianism, pescatarian, Mediterranean, any of these diet camps, I can take that same exact argument and flip it against any one of those, because true behavior change is what is going to lead to long-term compliance. And so there's so many people that, myself and then the people that we coach, and you see them on Keto Gains, you see them on all these different groups. People have been able to do it for years because it clicks with them, it sticks with them. They're not hungry, they enjoyed the foods. These are things that lead to compliance. And then also they overcame toxic habits, toxic relationship with foods, binge eating behavior, that type of stuff. And I've seen great results with people with a ketogenic diet. So this argument that she's using is completely unfounded and really could be turned around and be used against any diet on the planet, because it really comes down to long-term behavior change. All right, let's get going.
1 to 2 years, any effects that it has on either weight or blood pressure or blood sugar seem to be similar to other low-calorie or low-fat diets. And the other issue is we really don't have a lot of long-term research to...
Okay, so she talks about after 6 months, after a few years, things kind of level off. But again, that goes with any diet. It's funny. It's not like you take an uncontrolled diabetic with blood sugars of 180, 200 above, you get them on a well-formulated low-carb or ketogenic approach, and a year or two later, they've reached, even 6 months, even less sometimes, they reach normal blood sugars around 100, 110, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, and then they stable off. Well, of course, that's what's going to happen. The body's going to reach homeostasis. It's not like their blood sugar is going to drop down to zero, or their blood pressure is going to drop down to zero. Duh. Yeah, things called level off. That's, again, that's kind of the nature of the beast of any diet. And so she's framing this up like it's a negative, but again, it applies to any diet under the sun. Now, on the slide, they talk about increases of bad cholesterol and the association with arrhythmia. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Prove either the safety of the keto diet or anything.
Oh yeah, and with the long-term studies, no diet has really good long-term studies. It doesn't exist. So this is another argument that I could point to veganism. I could point to paleo. I could point to carnivore. None of these studies have good long-term studies because A, it's really hard to do. It's really expensive to do. And most of the science that this nutritional space is built on epidemiology studies and basically garbage science. And so they're going to say, oh, there's not been a random controlled trial study long term for showing the efficiency of a keto diet. It's like, well, we haven't really done that with the standard American diet either. It doesn't exist for any diet. But also no random, Rob Wolf, I believe, said there's no randomized control trials showing that if you drop a hammer on your foot, it's going to hurt. And yet we kind of know that that's what's going to happen. And so just because there's no study on it doesn't automatically mean that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. So
any sort of heart
But
benefits.
certainly, we're just looking at the graphic, seems to have some downside.
Right. So
Higher cholesterol.
exactly. So because you're eating 90% fat, a lot of people choose saturated fat. So things like coconut oil, butter, bacon, red meat, and that can drive up your LDL.
Okay. So again, that's assuming that you're consuming 90% of your calories from fat, which is not an optimal way to do it to begin with. So right away, this is structured in such a way that it's asinine to begin with, and it's very misleading to begin with. But then also, let's talk about LDL, or quote-unquote bad cholesterol, because this is an oversimplification that HDL is good cholesterol, LDL is bad cholesterol. And it turns out that LDL is not a very good indicator for disease to begin with. So when we talk about LDL, or my LDLs go up, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, was that a complete particle count, or did you check particle size? Because that's a big thing too. You have different sizes of LDL. You have small, dense, and you kind of have these large, fluffy. The large fluffy, I think they refer to that as pattern A, and the small, dense is pattern B. And it's believed that pattern B, the small dense, is the more atherogenic form of LDL. But we do show that people going low carb, going keto, that there may or may not be an uptick in overall LDL, but most people show a pattern shift from the B, which is believed to be the bad one, the small dense, to the more benign pattern A, which is the large fluffy. So again, just saying LDL goes up, well, that can happen in some people, but there's a lot of people that it doesn't, and their LDL actually goes down. But then also, what are we talking about LDL? How is that being measured? Are we going by particle size or not? So again, these are just like sound bites that these people throw out that are very, very misleading. So, and it's just like the whole thing with cholesterol as well. When we package cholesterol, what does that mean in the context? And also, like you talk with Dave Feldman, if you're actively losing weight and you are releasing fatty acids into your bloodstream to be used as fuel, it might make sense that cholesterol and LDL and stuff are going up because you are releasing the floodgates of using these things for fuel. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's causing an atherogenic or inflammatory response. So anyways, so yeah, continue
which
here.
is your bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
In addition, you may be depleted of things like magnesium or selenium, which is a mineral, and that can be pro-arrhythmic. In fact, there was a study this past fall that showed that individuals who ate the keto diet, it was associated with increased risk of atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heart rhythm.
Okay, so getting back to that. All right, so first off, we're talking about being depleted in selenium and magnesium. I don't know where she gets this from. She has no source for that, but let's look up selenium-rich foods. So let's see, and I'm going for Healthline for this. Brazil nuts, that's fairly keto. Fish, high in selenium. Yellowfin tuna contains 92 micrograms of selenium per 3 ounces. Other examples are sardines, oysters, clams, halibut, shrimp, salmon, crab. Those are all perfectly keto. Ham. They say, ham has high salt content, but it provides 42 micrograms for a 3-ounce serving, or 60% of the RDA. Ham's perfectly keto, pork, beef, turkey, chicken, cottage cheese, eggs. It's really not until this list that we get into brown rice and baked beans and oatmeal, and milks, milk and yogurt. Yeah, I guess. Bananas are rich in selenium, but there's plenty of foods, mushrooms, spinach. There's eggs. There's plenty of keto-friendly foods that are rich in selenium. So again, I don't know where she's getting this. And then let's talk about magnesium. Because they'll say about magnesium, you know, you're getting rid of whole grains and you're getting rid of all of this stuff. Basically whole grains, I guess bananas have some magnesium. So because you're cutting out whole grains and bananas, apparently you're going to be magnesium deficient. But if you allow yourself some almonds, Brazil nuts, stuff like that, those are high in magnesium. But avocado, which is a perfectly good keto food, has plenty of magnesium with it. And then my biggest thing is, and some fish, this article even has fish, salmon, mackerel, halibut, perfectly keto foods that have magnesium. But lastly, leafy greens. Loaded with magnesium, kale, spinach, collard greens, turnip greens, and mustard greens all have a good amount of magnesium, which, you know, when I'm just in regular mode, I eat tons of those foods. And I've never even really had to supplement with magnesium. I've had to supplement with sodium and a little bit with potassium, but I've never actually had to supplement magnesium. I've always been okay getting it from whole foods. So again, this is a straw man argument that she's saying hypothetically could, but in a well-formulated keto diet, there's no reason you should be low on selenium or magnesium. And now, bringing back to this study that she's talking about showing keto diets being linked to AFib, it turns out that study, let's bring that up here, as I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. So this turns out to have been an epidemiology study, okay? And we all know how epidemiology sucks. I have a whole podcast on that episode on that. And so what they did in this epidemiology study is they broke people up into carbohydrate groups, low, moderate, and high. Well, let's quantify what the low carbohydrate group was. And that was the low intake group consumed about 44% of their calories in the form of carbohydrates. So she's labeling this as the keto group, yet they even just said earlier that only 5 to 10% of calories come from carbohydrates. So this is very, very far from a keto group. In fact, it's, to most people who do low carb, we would say that this isn't even all that low of carb. And so right away, the argument is it's not factual to begin with. And so everything she builds on top of this is just on a house of cards. And so this is not a article or a study showing that keto causes AFib, because it's a correlative study, it's an epidemiological study, and we know correlation does not equal causation. But what she's calling the keto group wasn't even that low carb to begin with. So it's all BS. So there is no evidence that we can even remotely suggest that keto diets cause AFib. Let's get going here.
Right.
And then because you're not eating a lot of vegetables, fruits, and legumes, you're really not getting those antioxidants.
Who says over half of my plates before starting this carnivore cut, over half of my plate volume was loaded up with veggies?
and the fiber that we know is
So what do you advise patients then?
So I do have that sort of risk-benefit discussion with them and try to tease out, well, why are you doing this? If it's really just for a short-term kickstart weight loss, that might be okay. But then at that 6-month mark, you probably want to transition to a more healthier pattern of eating.
And something that's sustainable. That's always
Yes.
the key.
Yeah.
The intermittent fasting diet. I know a lot of people on it who swear by it, really like it.
Vladimir Dutier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
More.
That's right, Vladimir.
My
Putin.
father, yes.
Your dad.
Yes.
dad.
Who's also a
He's
cardiologist.
a cardiologist. A lot of people do it. And
How does that affect your heart?
so again, the science isn't there. A lot of the studies have been in animals, and there really haven't been long-term studies. But what we know is that it does seem to kind of reset the body a little bit. When
So again, the science isn't there, but again, that can be used for any friggin' diet under the sun. Now, it's going to be funny because you're going to see that she actually doesn't have that big of a problem with intermittent fasting. But it's so funny that a lot of the arguments that she used against keto, she doesn't really choose to use against intermittent fasting, even though we could use the very same arguments.
you have that time where you're not eating, that fasting period. And that can allow the body to kind of clear out toxins. It can regulate blood pressure and heart rate and blood sugar and cholesterol and be
Agreed.
anti-inflammatory. So there do seem to be the potential for benefits with
Are there known
intermittent
heart
fasting.
risks?
We don't really know, again, because we haven't really studied it long term. But you're essentially inducing a state of ketosis similar to the keto diet because you're allowing your body to break down fat.
Because you only eat a certain.
So it's funny. She shows favor with the intermittent fasting, yet she lambasted the keto. And sorry, keto folks, but we only have ourselves to blame because that's how we branded it as a high-fat diet. And these are the repercussions that we get for branding it as such. So it's interesting with intermittent fasting that she is kind of showing favor to that, and she does bring up the fact that we do kind of dip into ketosis. But when we look at there's no long-term studies, well, let's look at history. At what point, like I said earlier with us being cyclical ketogenic, seasonally, at what point in human history, up until real recently, were we able to eat 6 meals a day, snack all the time? It never happened. So intermittent fasting to me is the natural way of eating.
Times,
Yeah.
right?
There's different types, right? There's alternate day fasting.
Yeah.
There's sort of a fasting for time restricted feeding where you eat only for 6 or 8 hours during the day and then you don't eat.
Yeah.
How is your dad, also a cardiologist, liking it?
He likes it. I couldn't do it. It's very hard for me to skip breakfast, for example.
And I'm betting why it's hard for her to skip breakfast is because she's so glucose dependent. One of the liberating things that I find with the ketogenic diet or low carb or becoming metabolically flexible, being able to use fat as fuel, is that you don't get as hungry, you don't get these mood swings, these energy swings, and all that stuff. So if she is a pure sugar burner, those folks do have issues a lot of times, intermittent fasting, until they get really good at it and they get that metabolic flexibility built up. But I find it interesting that she has an issue skipping breakfast when, I could skip breakfast the vast majority of days if I chose to.
Example in the
Yeah.
morning. But a lot of people really do swear by it.
And on this heart month, are there some diets that you say are excellent for your heart?
So plant-based, all of my cardiology colleagues
Here we go.
seem to be promoting,
That
as I
means
do.
no burger, Tara.
That means Impossible Burger, Beyond Burger. If there are options.
So here she goes talking about now she bashed keto and now she's embracing plant-based, which I actually want to, if it's a well-formulated plant-based diet, what does plant-based mean? Does that mean 90% of your food volume or calories come from plants, or does that mean 51%? What does plant-based mean? But then she goes on to tout Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger, these frankenfoods that are 100% processed, that the nutritional value of them are crap, the ecological impact on the environment of sourcing these things is abysmal, yet that's what she says. Oh, you can have burgers, you can have these Franken meat burgers. Arrgh!
Alternate burgers.
Yeah.
So plant-based, we've learned that it's not just the vegetables and fruits that may be healthier, but when you eat animal products, your gut bacteria actually create a byproduct called TMAO, and that byproduct can be pro-atherosclerotic or formation of plaque.
So TMAO, they actually brought this up in Game Changers as well as a straw man, as a scary argument. But when you actually go and look at the studies showing that TMAO being indicative of heart disease, it's the same. It's going back to epidemiology. There's been shown no causal link between TMAO and heart disease. They found correlation. But again, that same correlation is what the diet heart hypothesis, blaming cholesterol for all this stuff, what has been built on over the last 40, 50 years. And now we know that that's bunk. But this whole TMAO argument is the same kind of science. There has been no actual causal pathway to show TMAO being atherogenic or, really showing a causative factor of increased heart risk.
Leading to heart disease.
Okay.
Okay.
Gail's not happy,
Thank you,
but
Debbie
thanks,
Downer.
Sarah.
The Mediterranean diet.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I'm okay with the Mediterranean diet. But anyway, so sorry to get so worked up, but this is the type of information that gets spread. I have been recording for 40 minutes, and yet this video under 4 minutes will be spread a heck of a lot wider and faster than what my little rant here is going to. So this is what gets me worked up, and I do apologize for that, but we cannot let this stand. We have to be stewards of correct information. So without any further ado, I'm going to wrap up the show. Hopefully this makes sense that, if you see this video or people ask you about it, you have a little bit of fuel. There are some links to some further articles. Amy Berger did a good wrap up on the whole cholesterol LDL thing, going keto, on her To It Nutrition blog. Chris Kresser has done some good stuff on showing about TMAO. I'll link these in the show notes. But I hope you guys enjoyed today, and I'm going to try to chime in a little bit more regularly, even if it's just 15-20 minutes, just kind of give you updates on what's going on. And then, like I said, any guests that you'd like to hear about, any topics you'd like to hear about, let me know. I scrapped today. I was going to actually talk about airway and sleep, but I'm going to do that for another couple episodes coming up. So until then, guys, take care. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.